Welcome to the Global News Roundup. This week, we're tackling the big stories, the ones that have everyone talking. And there's a lot to dig into. We've got a major political shakeup in the Middle East, the Assad regime falling after 50 years. And in France, there's a case that's really, it's got everyone questioning things.
You're spot on about the power shifts. This week, we'll see how these events, how they're playing out on the world stage and also in individual lives. It's fascinating, really.
It is. Okay, so first up, Syria. Total shocker, right? Bashar al-Assad's regime is over. 50 years. Gone. Just like that. And the speed of it all, it really makes you think about how unpredictable things can be, especially in a place like Syria.
It's been a whirlwind for sure. A rebel coalition, they're the ones in control now. Led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, they're in Damascus.
HTS, and they're known for their Islamist ideology. It's making a lot of people nervous.
Rightfully so. A lot of countries have labeled them a terrorist organization based on, their past actions. So this change in power, it's definitely unsettling a lot of people.
For sure. Especially Syria's minorities. The Alawites, they were closely aligned with Assad, and now they're worried about what comes next.
Right. And then you have the Christians in Syria. They faced a lot of persecution over the years. So this power shift, it's amplifying their anxieties for sure.
And the Druze community, too. They had a certain level of autonomy under Assad. And now, they're on high alert, ready to defend themselves.
It's a very real fear, especially with the potential for ISIS to take advantage of this chaos. We've seen more ISIS activity since Assad fell.
And those prisons, the ones run by the SDF, the ones holding thousands of ISIS fighters, they're looking vulnerable.
Yeah. General Mazloum Abdi of the SDF. He's basically pleading for help, for international help, to contain this threat. It's a very real danger.
It's a complicated situation, no doubt. Right. On the one hand, you have HTS trying to present a more moderate image. Remember that photo of al-Shara, their leader, with an unveiled woman?
Oh, yeah. That caused quite a backlash, especially from the hardliners within their own ranks.
Right. But then on the other hand, they're promising amnesty to prisoners from the Assad regime. A lot of those prisoners are ISIS members.
It's a risky strategy, to say the least.
Very risky. And speaking of risky, the domino effect of targeted killings in the Middle East, it's continuing. Back in July, Israel confirmed they killed Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran.
That was a big one, Haniyeh. He was a major figure in Hamas.
And then their new leader, Yahya Sinwar, he was killed by Israeli forces too, just a few months later in October.
And they haven't named a successor yet. That's how volatile things are.
It's unsettling. And it doesn't stop there. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, he was assassinated too in Beirut back in September. It's like a powder keg over there.
Each assassination seems to, fuel the fire. It's a cycle of violence that's hard to break.
And in the middle of all this, the war in Gaza is raging on. Remember, it started with Hamas's attack on Israel last October. Over 1,200 people were killed, and over 200 hostages were taken.
Right. And Israel's response, it's been devastating. The Hamas-run health ministry, they're reporting over 45,000 casualties in Gaza.
It's a humanitarian crisis. Oxfam reported that barely any aid has been able to get through to northern Gaza over the past few months. They're blaming Israel for deliberately blocking access.
A very grim picture. But there's a glimmer of hope. Some Palestinian groups have said a ceasefire might be close, although some big issues are still on the table.
Well, let's hope they can reach an agreement soon. Okay, switching gears a bit. Donald Trump, he's president-elect again, as you know, and it seems he still has his sights set on Greenland.
Yes. His fascination with the Arctic island, it seems to have endured.
He's back on Truth Social, saying that Greenland is an absolute necessity for the United States. He's even citing national security and freedom throughout the world.
Interesting. And what does Greenland have to say about that?
Well, Greenland's prime minister, Mute Ijid, shut it down pretty quickly. He said, "Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland. We are not for sale."
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? A bit like a repeat of history.
A bit. It's almost comical. But it also makes you wonder about Trump's approach to foreign policy and, his grasp of international relations.
It does raise some questions.
And while we're on the topic of Trump and, questionable international dealings, he's also stirring the pot in Panama. He's now threatening to try and take back control of the Panama Canal. He's saying they're charging American ships ridiculous fees.
Wow. Another bold move. Or maybe baffling is the better word.
The Panama Canal is a pretty big deal, one of the most important waterways in the world. It connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In the U.S., we did control it for decades. But treaties gradually returned control to Panama.
Right. And it's been under their control fully since 1999.
And now Trump's calling these fees for American ships, ridiculous and unfair. And he's vowing to, get this, he's vowing to demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us unless they lower the rates.
Strong words. And what was Panama's response?
Panama's president, Jose Raul Molino, basically said, the canal is ours. Our sovereignty is not up for debate. He wasn't mincing words.
It sounds like it sounds like a preview of what a second Trump presidency might look like on the global stage.
Maybe. But let's move on to some concerning news closer to home. Former President Bill Clinton has been hospitalized.
Oh, what happened?
His spokesman shared that he's at Georgetown University Medical Center in Washington, D.C. They're running tests and keeping him under observation. He developed a fever.
That's worrying, especially given his age and, well, his history with heart problems.
It is. And it brings back memories of his hospitalization back in 2021 for that blood infection.
Right. But his spokesman did say that he's in good spirits, and sources close to him, they're saying it's not an emergency.
That's good to hear. Fingers crossed for a speedy recovery.
Absolutely. Okay, switching gears completely. This one's a bit of a, well, it's a story that sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller. Former Israeli intelligence agents, they're spilling the beans on a covert operation. It involved booby-trapped gadgets.
Wait. Booby-trapped gadgets, like exploding gadgets.
Yeah, you heard right. Mossad, that's Israel's intelligence agency. They apparently spent a decade tricking Hezbollah into buying thousands of walkie-talkies and pagers, but these gadgets, they were rigged with explosives.
That's intense. How did they even manage that?
It's a wild story. They hid the explosives inside the batteries. And Hezbollah fighters, they'd usually carry these devices in vests close to their hearts. A couple of years ago, Mossad found out that Hezbollah was buying pagers from a company in Taiwan. So they set up a fake company, same name, and started selling rigged pagers.
Wow. That level of planning, it's incredible. But the payoff, was this what caused those explosions in Lebanon back in September?
Yeah. Thousands of those devices detonated, causing a lot of chaos and casualties. It's an operation that raises a lot of questions, moral and legal ones.
Certainly. Okay, let's lighten the mood a bit. Melting permafrost, it's revealing some incredible prehistoric treasures in Russia. Scientists have unearthed a baby mammoth, remarkably well preserved. They're calling her Yana.
It's like a window into the past, isn't it? Yana, she's estimated to be around 50,000 years old. She was only a year old when she died.
And they found her in the Bada crater. That's the biggest permafrost crater in the world.
It's amazing what they're finding as the planet warms. A bit concerning, but also fascinating.
It is. They also found a mummified saber-toothed cat, nearly 32,000 years old, and a wolf, 44,000 years old. Incredible.
Incredible finds, for sure.
Okay, let's turn our attention to some political drama unfolding in the U.S. Matt Gaetz, a former Republican congressman, once a close ally of Trump's. Well, he's facing some serious accusations of misconduct.
Yeah, this is a big one. The House Ethics Committee, they just released their report on Gaetz, and it's not good. They found substantial evidence that he violated House rules: prostitution, statutory rape, illicit drug use.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is. The report alleges that between 2017 and 2020, Gaetz paid over $90,000 to 12 different women for, well, let's just say, services that were likely in connection with sexual activity and sheet door drug use. He was also allegedly buying cocaine, ecstasy, and a lot of marijuana.
Doesn't sound like he was trying to keep it a secret.
Not at all. The report even says he was asking women to bring him marijuana cartridges to meetings and events. There's even mention of a trip to the Bahamas with a guy connected to the medical marijuana industry, where they allegedly had female escorts paid for by this associate.
It seems like he was living a pretty wild life, and now it's all catching up to him.
It is, and one of the most serious allegations is that he paid a 17-year-old girl for sex back in 2017.
That's very disturbing.
It is. And his friend, Joel Greenberg, he's already in prison for 11 years. He pleaded guilty to sex trafficking that same girl. So there are a lot of people calling for a deeper investigation.
What's Gaetz saying about all of this?
He denies everything, says it's a smear campaign. But honestly, when you look at the evidence the committee has gathered, it's hard to believe him.
We'll have to see if this plays out. Okay, in other news from the U.S., President Biden commuted the sentences of 37 federal death row inmates.
It's a landmark move by Biden. Shows his stance against the death penalty. These commutations are for life in prison without parole.
He did exclude some high-profile cases like the Boston Marathon bomber.
Right. He's trying to balance, I suppose, his opposition to the death penalty with public sentiment. But his statement was very clear. He said, "We must stop the use of the death penalty at the federal level."
It's a bold statement. It's sure to spark some debate, especially considering it doesn't impact the thousands of inmates on death row at the state level.
It definitely exposes the inconsistencies in the U.S. justice system, but it also shows how a president can, well, how they can really push a conversation forward.
Absolutely. Okay, let's turn our attention to space exploration. NASA's Parker Solar Probe, it's attempting to make history. The closest ever approach to the sun.
That's right. It's actually flying into the sun's outer atmosphere, the corona. And on Christmas Eve, it got incredibly close, just 3.8 million miles from the sun's surface.
Wait, they're flying a probe into the sun? That's incredibly close. Why take such a risk?
Well, scientists are trying to understand why the corona is millions of degrees hotter than the sun's surface. It's a mystery that's puzzled them for a long time. And the Parker Solar Probe is collecting data that could help solve it.
I see. But I mean, how can a spacecraft even survive that close to the sun?
It's designed to withstand those conditions, the intense heat and radiation. It has a heat shield, and it's built to last, at least for short periods.
Hopefully it survives its fiery encounter. When do we hear back from the probe?
We should get a signal on December 27th. Fingers crossed.
Okay, let's move on to a story closer to home. The murder of Brian Thompson. He was the CEO of United Healthcare. There's been a lot of speculation about the motives behind his death.
It was a shocking case, shot in broad daylight in central Manhattan.
Right. And the suspect, Luigi Mangione, he just pleaded not guilty to murder charges and terrorism charges. Terrorism charges. Wow. What's the thinking there?
The prosecution believes it was a targeted killing, aimed at intimidating the U.S. healthcare industry.
It seems like this case is, well, it's tapping into a lot of the anger and frustration that people have with the healthcare system in this country.
Definitely. The high costs, the limited access, all the bureaucratic hurdles, it's a source of stress for a lot of Americans.
Mangione's facing both state and federal charges, and that includes the possibility of the death penalty. This case is going to be in the headlines for a while.
It'll be a closely watched trial for sure.
Absolutely. From a targeted killing to a shocking act of random violence. A man has been charged with murder after setting a woman on fire on the New York subway.
This one really shook people up. It happened on an F train in Brooklyn. He just walked up to her and used a lighter to set her clothes on fire. Just horrific.
It's just, I can't even imagine. It's a reminder of how vulnerable we all are, even in places that are supposed to be safe.
And the really chilling part is, well, there was no interaction between them beforehand. They didn't even know each other.
What's the latest on the investigation?
The suspect, Sebastian Zepeda, he's 33 years old. He was caught because of 3 high school students. They recognized him from another train and reported him to the police.
Wow, good for them. That's incredible. But the big question is why? Why would he do something like that?
That's what the police are trying to figure out. It seems completely random, which makes it even more terrifying. It makes you think about, mental health issues and the need for more compassion in society.
It does. Okay, let's shift gears now. This story is about religious freedom and the treatment of minority groups. Tensions are flaring up in Guatemala over the Levtahor sect.
This group, they're known for their controversial practices, things like child marriage and harsh punishments, and they require women and girls to be completely covered from a young age.
They've had issues with authorities in several countries, haven't they?
Yeah. And in Guatemala, the government decided to move about 150 members of the sect, including children, to a care center.
Why did they do that?
They were concerned about the Levtahor's practices, especially the treatment of children. They said the sect was isolating its members, denying them access to education and healthcare. But sect, they saw this as religious persecution.
So things escalated.
Quickly. The sect members, they broke into the care center. They were trying to get their children back, which led to clashes with the police.
It's a tough situation. Religious freedom versus the government's responsibility to protect vulnerable people. It's hard to find a balance.
It is, and it highlights the challenges that come up when cultural and religious practices clash with broader societal norms.
Okay, this next story is about the push and pull between self-governing territories and their parent countries. Things are heating up between the Cook Islands and New Zealand. It's about citizenship.
The Cook Islands, they're currently in free association with New Zealand. So Cook Islanders are New Zealand citizens. They have New Zealand passports, but their prime minister, Mark Brown, he wants a separate passport and citizenship for his people.
Sounds like a power move. What's New Zealand's take on this?
New Zealand's foreign minister, Winston Peters, he's made it clear that separate citizenship is only an option for fully independent countries. So either full independence or the status quo.
Seems pretty cut and dry.
It does, but here's the thing. A huge number of Cook Islanders, almost 100,000, they live in New Zealand. They can even vote in New Zealand elections. So separating the two countries, easier said than done.
Yeah, that's complicated. Okay, shifting gears now. This is about the impact of natural disasters. Cyclone Cheeto has hit Mozambique. It's killed at least 94 people so far.
It's been devastating. The cyclone first hit Mayotte, that's a French island in the Indian Ocean. Then it moved on to Mozambique, slamming the northern provinces. Winds up to 160 miles per hour, torrential rainfall.
The damage is extensive. Homes destroyed, infrastructure crippled, agricultural land wiped out. It's a lot to take in.
And INGD, that's Mozambique's disaster management agency, they're saying the death toll is likely to rise.
How many people have been affected?
Over 622,000. And that number is expected to grow. As rescue and recovery efforts continue, there are reports of shortages, food, water, medical supplies. It's bad.
A desperate situation.
It really underscores how vulnerable these communities are, especially in the face of climate change. And these disasters, they just keep happening.
Okay, let's circle back to the U.S., to the Matt Gaetz situation. Some pretty shocking details are coming out about his alleged behavior, all from that House Ethics Committee report.
It's a look into a world of illicit transactions and attempts to cover his tracks.
Give me an example.
Well, for one, he allegedly set up this whole web of transactions to hide the money he was using to pay women for sex and drugs. Over $90,000. And Joel Greenberg, his buddy who's currently in prison, well, he apparently acted as Gaetz's middleman.
Shady.
Very shady. And then there's the drug use, the cocaine and ecstasy we already knew about. But this report highlights what seems like a pretty serious marijuana habit.
Marijuana.
Yeah, asking women to bring him marijuana cartridges to events, using a fake email to buy more.
It sounds like he wasn't even trying to be subtle.
Yeah.
And what about that Bahamas trip? What was that all about?
Well, according to the report, Gaetz and this associate of his, this guy with ties to the medical marijuana industry, they flew to the Bahamas, and they had female escorts, paid for by this associate.
Potential conflict of interest there. Especially for someone in his political position. It's not a good look.
Not at all.
We definitely need a break from this political drama. How about some lighter news?
Sounds good to me. How about this? Fans in India, they're getting fed up with the infrastructure at live concerts.
Really? I thought India's music scene was, well, it was booming.
It is, and that's part of the problem. The industry's grown so fast. Huge international acts are coming, like Dua Lipa and Maroon 5, but the venues haven't kept up.
What kind of problems are we talking about?
Well, poor crowd control, terrible sanitation, overloaded mobile networks, and the ticket prices are sky high. One fan complained about having an accident because he couldn't find a bathroom at a Bryan Adams concert.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's gotten so bad that even Diljit Dosanjh, one of India's biggest stars, he publicly criticized the venues, even threatened not to perform again until things improve.
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is, and it shows how frustrated people are. The organizers and promoters, they say they're limited by India's wider infrastructure challenges. They're often stuck using malls, stadiums, even public land.
I see. So it's not really designed for concerts.
Exactly. And to book government-owned venues, it's a bureaucratic nightmare.
So they're in a tough spot. What can be done?
Some people in the industry, they say India needs to invest in dedicated concert venues. With proper infrastructure, it would not only improve things for fans, but it would also make it more affordable for smaller, independent artists to perform.
Makes sense. It's a growing pain, it seems, for a booming industry.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can figure out a way to make the concert experience better for everyone.
I agree. Okay, speaking of venues, how about we talk about a town that's really embracing the Second Amendment? Kennesaw, Georgia. They have a law that requires every household to own a gun.
Wait, really? You need a gun to live there?
That's what the law says. It's been around since 1982. It says that every head of household needs to have a firearm and ammunition to provide for the safety, security, and general welfare of the city.
That's different. So are people getting arrested for not owning guns?
Not really. It's never actually been enforced. It's more symbolic, I think.
So it's more of a statement than an actual law.
Pretty much. Some residents, they love it. They see it as a deterrent to crime, sends a message that they're ready to defend themselves.
I can see that. But others must not be so happy about it.
Definitely. Others think it's embarrassing, outdated. They say it perpetuates a culture of fear and violence.
It definitely highlights the deep divisions in America over gun control, a very complex issue.
It is a debate that will probably continue for years to come.
Okay, let's turn our attention to Germany now. There's been a devastating attack on a Christmas market in Magdeburg. It's left the country reeling.
It's horrific. A car plowed into a crowd, killed 5 people, injured hundreds more. The perpetrator was arrested immediately. A 50-year-old Saudi refugee. His name is Taleb al-Abdul Mohsen.
What's the latest on the investigation?
The authorities are trying to understand his motives, and it's turning out to be a very complicated case. Previous attacks like this in Germany were linked to Islamic extremism, but al-Abdul Mohsen's social media reveals he was actually critical of Islam, and he supported Germany's far-right party, the AfD. They're known for their anti-immigrant views.
So this is a very different kind of attack.
It seems that way, and it's raising concerns about the rise of right-wing extremism in Germany.
How has the AfD responded?
They've condemned the attack, tried to distance themselves from al-Abdul Mohsen, but a lot of people believe their rhetoric has fueled this kind of hatred and violence.
This story has far-reaching implications. It's not just about a single attack, but about the broader societal tensions in Germany.
Right, and it underscores the need for greater vigilance against all forms of extremism. It's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent.
Let's go back to Cyclone Cheeto now. We talked about the devastation in Mozambique earlier, but now survivors on the island of Mayotte, they're sharing their stories, their experiences.
The cyclone hit Mayotte hard, left the island in ruins. Survivors are talking about loss, fear, and resilience.
What are some of their stories?
Well, one young man, Zinedine, he shared his story with the BBC. He and 8 relatives were huddled under a table when the cyclone ripped the roof off their house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was chaos. He had to rescue his mother, who was paralyzed with fear, and she was holding a 1-year-old baby.
That's terrifying.
They survived, but they lost everything except their important documents. And they're not alone. Another survivor, Yasmin Musa, she's 18 years old. She went to a school shelter with her 3 young children.
Imagine the fear.
It was traumatic. But they're alive. Now, like countless others on Mayo, they're trying to rebuild their lives with very few resources.
How has the French government responded?
Slowly. Which has caused a lot of anger and frustration. President Macron visited the island recently, and people were booing and jeering him. They're desperate for help.
They must feel abandoned.
Many of them do. Macron pledged to rebuild and offer compensation, but the details are vague, and people are skeptical.
It's another example of how natural disasters, they often expose the underlying social and political tensions that exist.
Exactly.
Let's go back to Syria. With the fall of the Assad regime, there's a new era of uncertainty, especially for minority groups. They're trying to figure out what this power shift means for them.
It's a time of anxiety for sure.
We talked about the fears of the Alawites, Christians, and Druze earlier, but it's worth mentioning that there are LGBTQ+ Syrians who are, well, they're cautiously optimistic about this change.
That's right. Under Assad, being gay was illegal. It was often met with brutal persecution, torture, imprisonment, even killings. But with Assad gone, some are hoping for a more tolerant future.
What are they hoping for, and what are their concerns?
One gay Syrian, Rene, he told reporters about how he was tortured under the Assad regime. He barely escaped with his life. Now he's hoping that HTS will be more accepting of LGBTQ+ people.
That's a big hope, considering HTS's history.
It is. But Rene points out that HTS is under pressure from the international community to modernize, to be more tolerant. He thinks they might be willing to compromise on certain issues to gain legitimacy on the world stage.
It's a risky bet, but I can understand his hope.
Absolutely. And then there's the story of Nujeen Mustafa, a young Kurdish woman with cerebral palsy. She became a symbol of resilience during the Syrian war, remember? She made that dangerous journey to Europe in a wheelchair.
I remember. It was incredibly inspiring. What's she saying about the fall of Assad?
She's cautiously optimistic. She's glad to see Assad gone, but she knows there are challenges ahead, especially for marginalized communities like hers. She's urging the international community to support a peaceful transition, one that guarantees the rights of all Syrians, including those with disabilities.
A powerful message. It underscores the need for a more inclusive and equitable future for Syria.
Definitely.
Okay, this next story is raising concerns about the safety of American travelers. There's a disturbing trend emerging in Mexico.
What's going on?
The U.S. State Department has issued a travel advisory. They're warning Americans about the dangers of traveling to certain parts of Mexico. There's been a surge in kidnappings.
Kidnappings, that's scary. What's behind this increase?
It seems to be connected to the drug war in Mexico. Cartels are targeting tourists and expats for ransom. They're using sophisticated tactics to lure and abduct their victims. It's a nightmare scenario.
Are there certain areas that are particularly dangerous?
The advisory specifically mentions Cancun, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum.
Wow. Those are popular tourist spots.
They are. And it's causing a lot of anxiety for travelers. Some are reconsidering their plans.
Understandably, it's a serious situation.
What are the authorities doing about it?
Mexican and U.S. authorities are working together. They're increasing security and cracking down on the cartels. But it's a complex problem. It won't be solved overnight.
Travelers need to be aware of this. It's a reminder that even in places that seem idyllic, well, there can be danger lurking beneath the surface.
That's a good point.
Okay. This next story is about animal welfare. SeaWorld is facing a lawsuit. They're being accused of misleading the public about the well-being of its orcas.
This lawsuit was filed by a group of animal rights activists. They're claiming that SeaWorld is violating California's consumer protection laws. They say SeaWorld is promoting its orca shows as educational and entertaining, but they're hiding the truth about how the orcas are suffering in captivity.
What are they specifically alleging?
They're saying that the orcas are kept in small tanks, artificial tanks that don't meet their needs, their physical or psychological needs. They claim that the orcas are showing signs of stress, anxiety, even aggression.
And SeaWorld is hiding this from the public.
That's what they're saying. They say SeaWorld's marketing, it presents this sanitized version of the orcas' lives, ignores the negative consequences of captivity.
SeaWorld has been criticized for its treatment of orcas for years, though.
That's true. The documentary Blackfish, back in 2013, that really brought this issue to light.
Right. That film showed the impact of captivity on orcas, the psychological impact, and the danger they pose to themselves and their trainers.
Exactly. This lawsuit, it's the latest effort to hold SeaWorld accountable.
What's SeaWorld's response?
They're denying the allegations. They say they're committed to the well-being of their animals and that their parks provide educational opportunities for visitors.
This lawsuit will definitely bring more attention to the debate about keeping animals in captivity and the ethics of it all, especially for intelligent and social creatures like orcas. It's a conversation we need to have.
I agree.
Okay, this next story. This next story has left people all over the world outraged. There's a video showing a group of tourists harassing a monk seal in Hawaii.
Yeah, this happened on a beach in Kauai. It's gone viral and people are furious. It really highlights the dangers of irresponsible tourism and how important it is to protect endangered species.
What happened exactly?
Well, the video shows these tourists surrounding a monk seal that's just trying to rest on the beach. They're getting way too close, touching it, even trying to take selfies.
Oh, come on. That's terrible. Monk seals are endangered, right?
Yeah, they are. There are only about 1,400 Hawaiian monk seals left in the wild. That makes them one of the most endangered seal species in the world.
So these tourists were really putting this seal at risk.
Absolutely. Monk seals are very sensitive to being disturbed, especially when they're trying to rest, and it's illegal to touch or even approach them within 150 feet.
These tourists, it sounds like they were totally clueless about the rules.
Well, either that or they just didn't care. You can see in the video they're ignoring warnings from other people on the beach who were telling them to back off.
What happens if you harass a monk seal?
Oh, the penalties can be pretty serious. Huge fines, up to $50,000, even jail time.
Hopefully they'll be held accountable for their actions.
The authorities are investigating, and like I said, that video is everywhere, so it's going to be pretty hard for them to hide.
It's a good reminder that we all have a responsibility to respect wildlife and, to educate ourselves about the rules, the etiquette when we're visiting natural habitats.
Right. Our actions, even if they seem small, they can have a big impact, especially on vulnerable species.
Okay, this next story is about democracy. And, well, it's not good news. More and more countries are experiencing democratic backsliding.
Yeah, this is something experts have been warning about for years, and it's getting worse. The latest report from Freedom House, they're a nonprofit that tracks democracy globally. Well, they say the number of countries experiencing a decline in democratic freedoms is at its highest point in over 2 decades.
So we're seeing a global trend here of democracy in retreat.
It's more than a trend. It's a crisis. And it's happening everywhere. established democracies like the United States, newer democracies in Eastern Europe and Latin America. It's a global phenomenon.
What's causing this decline?
It's a lot of things. The rise of populist leaders, the erosion of democratic institutions, the spread of disinformation, and you can't forget about increasing economic inequality. It's all connected.
It sounds like a perfect storm.
It is. And it's having real consequences. Restrictions on freedom of speech, attacks on the press, less space for civil society. It's all happening.
What could happen in the long term if this keeps going?
Greater instability, conflict, human rights abuses. It's not a good trajectory.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It reminds us that democracy is fragile. We need to be vigilant, engaged citizens. We can't take it for granted.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting gears now. Tensions between China and the United States, they're still high. A Chinese fighter jet recently intercepted a U.S. Navy patrol plane over the South China Sea.
The South China Sea has been a hot spot for years, hasn't it?
It has. China claims sovereignty over most of it. But there are overlapping claims from several other countries, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia.
And the U.S. has been pushing back against China's claims.
Right. The U.S. does these freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. It's to assert their right to, sail and fly in international waters. And this often leads to these encounters with the Chinese military.
How did this latest incident unfold?
Well, according to the U.S. Navy, a Chinese J-11 fighter jet got dangerously close to a U.S. P-8 Poseidon patrol plane. The American plane had to swerve to avoid a collision.
That's scary.
It was a tense situation. The U.S. Navy even released video footage of the incident. It shows the Chinese jet flying within 500 feet of the American plane.
Wow. What's China saying?
They claim the U.S. plane was doing reconnaissance near Chinese territory, so they say their actions were justified.
Sounds like both sides are trying to flex their muscles.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game. It's raising concerns about potential miscalculations, maybe even escalation. It's not a good situation.
Okay, this next story is about artificial intelligence and, the potential for misuse. There's a deepfake video of Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky. It shows him surrendering to Russia, and it's been circulating online.
I saw that. It's incredibly realistic. He's standing at a podium urging his troops to lay down their arms.
It's amazing how convincing these deepfakes are getting.
It's a bit scary, actually. This video was debunked quickly by Ukraine and independent fact-checkers, but it had already spread pretty far on social media.
What's the concern here?
It shows how deepfakes can be used to spread disinformation and propaganda. It could influence public opinion, maybe even undermine morale.
He's like a weapon.
Exactly. And as the technology gets better, it's going to be even harder to tell what's real and what's fake.
We all need to be aware of this. Be critical thinkers.
Definitely. Be careful about what you believe online. And if something seems too good to be true, well, it probably is.
Good advice. All right, let's talk about finance. Cryptocurrency is making a comeback.
It is. After a pretty rough year, several major crypto exchanges collapsed, Bitcoin's value plummeted, but now the market's showing signs of life.
Cryptocurrency, it's always been a bit of a roller coaster.
That's one way to put it. It's very volatile, big swings in value, but lately there's been a surge in trading activity. Bitcoin's price is up, and so are other cryptocurrencies.
What's causing this?
A few factors, I think. Growing institutional interest, more focus on the technology behind it, and maybe just a feeling that the worst is over.
So is cryptocurrency back for good?
It's tough to say. The market's still young, unpredictable, but it's not going away anytime soon.
Okay, let's talk about climate change. A new study has found that the world's oceans are warming at an alarming rate.
Yeah, this is a big problem. It has consequences for all of us. According to the study, which was published in Nature, the oceans have absorbed 90% of the excess heat caused by human activity over the past century, and it's impacting everything. Marine ecosystems, weather patterns, coastal communities.
What are some of the specific impacts?
Rising sea levels, more intense storms, coral bleaching, and disruptions to marine food webs. It's a lot.
And these impacts are already being felt.
Oh, yeah. Coastal erosion, flooding, communities being displaced. We're seeing fish populations shift. That impacts fishermen, coastal economies. It's a domino effect.
A domino effect that could have serious consequences. It's a reminder that we need to do something about climate change. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Definitely. It's not something we can ignore.
Okay, let's switch gears now to immigration. Remember that group of migrants from Central America who were flown to Martha's Vineyard by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Well, they're suing him now.
They are. What for?
The lawsuit says DeSantis misled them, promised them jobs and housing if they got on those flights, but then he just dropped them off on an island with no resources.
Wow. Well, that's pretty messed up. What was he thinking?
It seems like it was a political stunt to bring attention to illegal immigration, to criticize Biden's border policies.
So he used these vulnerable people as pawns.
That's what the lawsuit alleges. They're saying they were exploited, subjected to emotional distress. They're suing for damages.
This case is going to raise some serious ethical questions about using migrants for political gain and the responsibility of government officials to treat people with dignity and respect.
It's a complex issue. No easy answers.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation we need to have.
I agree.
Okay, let's move on to a story that's inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. A 10-year-old girl from Ukraine, she was severely injured in a Russian missile strike. She's become a symbol of resilience and hope.
Well, that's so sad. What happened?
Her name is Sasha. She lost her leg in the attack. Her home was destroyed and several members of her family were killed. But she's shown incredible strength.
I can't even imagine.
She's been getting treatment at a hospital in the United States, and she's made amazing progress. She's even started walking again with a prosthetic leg.
That's wonderful.
It's a story about the human spirit, overcoming incredible odds.
A reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope.
Okay, let's talk about online safety. Cyberbullying is a growing problem, and it's having a real impact on young people.
Yeah, this is a big problem. It's so easy to hide behind a screen and say hurtful things. And with social media, it's constant.
It's really insidious.
Yeah.
Because it can happen anywhere, anytime. The victim feels like they're constantly under attack.
Exactly. And it's hard to escape. It can follow them everywhere online. It can have a serious impact on their self-esteem, their mental health, even their physical well-being. It's serious.
So what can be done?
It's a tough one. It needs a multi-pronged approach. Schools, parents, social media companies, they all have a role to play. Educate young people about cyberbullying, promote responsible online behavior, support the victims. It's a group effort.
We all have a part to play. Okay, let's move on to a story that celebrates the power of music. To heal, to unite. A group of musicians from Ukraine, they're touring the world, sharing their stories, raising awareness about the war.
Oh, that's amazing. What's the group called?
The Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra. It's made up of some of Ukraine's most talented musicians. Many of them have been personally impacted by the war.
I can imagine their music is very powerful.
It is. They play a mix of classical Ukrainian music and works by international composers. Their performances are often woven with messages of peace and resilience.
It's a powerful way to connect with people, to share their experiences.
Exactly. And they're using their concerts to raise money for humanitarian aid efforts in Ukraine. It's inspiring to see them using their talents to make a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go back to the United States for a moment.
Yeah.
A new study just came out about gun control. It found that states with stricter gun laws have lower rates of gun violence.
Interesting. What did this study look at?
It was conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins University. They analyzed data from all 50 states, and they found a strong correlation between stricter gun laws and lower rates of gun homicides, suicides, and unintentional shootings.
That makes sense.
It does.
Right.
It supports the argument that gun control measures can work, that they can save lives.
It does. And it's consistent with previous research on this topic. But of course, this is a highly politicized issue in the United States.
Very much so. The debate is deeply entrenched. Strong opinions on both sides.
What specific laws did the study find to be effective?
Universal background checks, waiting periods for gun purchases, bans on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, they all had an impact.
Those are all policies that gun control advocates have been pushing for.
Exactly. And this study, it provides more evidence to support their arguments. But of course, gun rights advocates, they say these laws infringe on their Second Amendment rights. It's the core of the debate. Individual rights versus public safety.
A complex issue for sure. But this study provides important data that can help inform the conversation.
It's a reminder that policy decisions should be based on facts and evidence, not just ideology.
Absolutely. Okay, switching gears to a story that's been ongoing for a while now. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen. It's just devastating. The country's facing a severe food shortage. Millions are at risk of starvation.
Yemen has been called the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and it's only getting worse.
It is. The civil war has made everything so much harder. disrupted food supplies, destroyed infrastructure, displaced millions of people. It's just a terrible situation all around.
The UN has said that over 17 million people in Yemen don't have enough food to meet their basic needs.
It's really hard to comprehend those numbers, and it's heartbreaking to think about what those people are going through.
What's being done to help?
International aid organizations are doing everything they can to provide food assistance, but the situation is overwhelming. The conflict makes it dangerous to deliver aid, and funding is always an issue.
It's a complex problem with no easy solutions.
It is, but it's a reminder that the effects of war, they go far beyond the battlefield.
Okay, let's talk about something a little less heavy. Remote work. It's becoming more and more popular. Lots of companies are offering their employees the option to work from home permanently.
It's a trend that's been growing for a while, but the pandemic really accelerated it. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Companies are realizing that remote work can be just as productive, maybe even more so.
And employees like it too.
Oh yeah, the flexibility, the work-life balance, it's very appealing. Plus, you save money on things like commuting.
But there are downsides, right?
Of course. Maintaining a strong company culture can be tough when everyone's working remotely, and some people find it isolating. But overall, it seems like remote work is here to stay.
It's definitely changing the way we work. Okay, this next story is about a breakthrough in solar energy. A group of engineers has developed a new type of solar panel that can generate electricity even on cloudy days.
That's amazing. How do they work?
Traditional solar panels need direct sunlight to work, but these new panels use a special material that can absorb a wider range of light wavelengths, even ultraviolet and infrared light, which are present even when it's cloudy.
So they can capture more energy, even when the sun isn't shining.
Exactly, which makes them much more efficient than regular solar panels.
This could be huge for the renewable energy sector, a real game changer in the fight against climate change.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about artificial intelligence and the potential for misuse. A company has developed an AI-powered system that can predict whether someone is likely to commit a crime.
Hold on, that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
Well, it uses algorithms to analyze tons of data, criminal records, social media activity, even facial features. And they're marketing it to law enforcement agencies as a crime prevention tool.
Wow. That raises a lot of ethical concerns.
It does. Critics are saying it's biased against certain groups, like people of color and those from low-income communities. They're worried it could be used to unfairly target people. It's a slippery slope.
It is. This technology, it reminds us that powerful tools can be used for good or bad. We need to be very careful.
Okay, let's move on to a story that's bringing hope to people struggling with infertility. Scientists have made a major breakthrough in artificial wombs.
Artificial wombs, like babies grown outside the body.
Exactly. It's still early stages, but researchers have already grown lamb fetuses in artificial wombs, and now they're working on the technology for human use.
This is incredible. What are the potential benefits?
Well, it could be a solution for women who can't carry a pregnancy to term because of medical reasons. It could also reduce the risks of premature births, and it could give new options to couples struggling with infertility.
This is a big development. It could change the future of reproduction.
Absolutely. Science is amazing, isn't it? Okay, let's talk about mental health. A new study has found that rates of depression and anxiety are increasing among young people.
Yeah, this is worrying. It's happening all over the world. Young people are under so much pressure these days. School, social media, the economy. It's a lot to handle.
It is. It's taking a toll on their mental health.
What are some of the warning signs to look out for?
Changes in mood, changes in their sleep patterns, appetite, social behavior, those can all be red flags.
Parents, teachers, friends, we all need to be aware of these signs.
And we need to talk about mental health. Early intervention is so important. Okay, let's move on to a fun discovery. Scientists have discovered a new species of frog in the Amazon rainforest.
That's cool. What's it like?
It's tiny, brightly colored, and has a unique croaking sound.
It's amazing that we're still discovering new species.
It is. The Amazon rainforest is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, and we've only identified a small percentage of the species that live there.
It's a good reminder that we need to protect these places. These ecosystems are so important.
They are. Okay, this next story is about climate change. A massive iceberg has broken off from the Antarctic ice sheet. It's twice the size of New York City.
Wow, that's huge. Where is it now?
It's floating in the Weddell Sea. Scientists are watching it because it could be dangerous for ships.
I can imagine.
And they're also concerned about the long-term effects of events like this. This is climate change in action.
It's a wake-up call. We need to take action to protect our planet.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about art. There's a new exhibit showcasing street art.
Oh, cool. Where is it?
It's in a former factory building. Murals, installations, sculptures, artists from all over the world.
Street art is really having a moment, isn't it? It's gone from the streets to galleries and museums.
What do you think is so appealing about it?
I think it's the rawness, the edginess. It's often very thought-provoking, and it can turn ordinary spaces into something really special.
This exhibit sounds like it's worth checking out. Okay, let's turn to immigration in the United States. A new report has found that immigrants are contributing a lot to the U.S. economy.
Really? That's interesting. Tell me more.
Well, the report was done by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. They found that immigrants are starting businesses, creating jobs, paying taxes.
That's great to hear, because
Yeah.
there's this narrative that immigrants are a drain on the economy.
Exactly. This report challenges that narrative. It provides evidence that immigrants are a valuable asset to the United States.
But immigration is still such a divisive issue in the U.S.
It is. It's often driven by fear and misinformation.
Hopefully this report can help change some minds. We need to base policy decisions on facts, not prejudice.
Absolutely. Okay, our last story for today is about compassion and the human spirit. A group of volunteers is rescuing animals that have been abandoned or injured in natural disasters.
That's amazing. Where are they working?
All over the world, they're risking their own lives to save these animals, animals that have been trapped in rubble, separated from their families.
Those volunteers are heroes.
They are. It's heartwarming to see people stepping up to help those in need, even our furry friends.
It is.
This is great news. Okay, this next story is about the global economy, and it's not looking so good. A new report from the International Monetary Fund has found that global economic growth is slowing down.
Yeah, there are some warning signs out there. The IMF says that rising inflation, supply chain problems, the war in Ukraine, it's all having an impact.
So are we heading for a recession?
It's definitely a possibility. The IMF is predicting global economic growth of just 2.9% this year. That would be the slowest growth since the 2008 financial crisis.
That's a bit concerning.
It is, and it's going to have a ripple effect around the world.
Okay, let's move on to something more positive. A team of scientists has made a major breakthrough in the fight against cancer.
Oh, wow. This is great news. What did they discover?
They developed a new immunotherapy treatment, and it's showing really promising results in clinical trials.
That's incredible. How does it work?
It uses the patient's own immune system to attack cancer cells, but it's been enhanced to be more precise and effective than previous therapies.
So it's a more targeted approach.
Exactly. It uses engineered immune cells and targeted antibodies to really go after those cancer cells. They're seeing tumors shrink, survival rates improve. It's a real game changer.
This is a beacon of hope for people battling cancer.
It is. It's a reminder of what's possible when brilliant minds come together. And it's a testament to the power of scientific research.
I completely agree.
Okay, this next story takes us back to the war in Ukraine. And it's a bit of a strange twist. There were reports that American veterans are joining the fight.
Really? That's interesting. Are there a lot of them?
Hundreds. Apparently, many of them have military experience. And they're choosing to fight alongside Ukrainian forces.
I wonder what's motivating them to do that.
It's probably a combination of things. Some might feel a sense of duty, to defend democracy. Others might be drawn to the camaraderie, the adrenaline of combat.
I can see that, but it's dangerous.
It is. It's a war zone. They're putting their lives at risk. And they could face legal trouble, too. The U.S. government has warned Americans not to go to Ukraine to fight.
It's a complicated situation, but it definitely shows the human impact of war, how it pulls people in from all over the world.
It does. Okay, this next story is about bird flu. And it's a bit alarming. Researchers have discovered a new strain that's highly contagious, and it's spreading quickly among mammals.
Oh, that doesn't sound good. What makes this strain different?
It's mutated in a way that lets it spread more easily between mammals. They found in mink, foxes, even sea lions.
And the concern is that it could jump to humans.
Exactly. If that happens and this virus starts spreading easily between people, it could be devastating.
Are they working on a vaccine?
They are. They're monitoring the situation and trying to develop a vaccine that will work against this new strain. It's a race against time, really. Hopefully they can get ahead of it. Fingers crossed. Okay, Our last story for today is about food insecurity in the United States. It seems strange, but in a country with so much abundance, millions of people are struggling to get enough to eat.
It's a sad reality. 1 in 8 Americans are food insecure. That includes millions of children.
It's a complex problem with a lot of contributing factors. Poverty, rising food prices, job losses, lack of affordable housing. And the pandemic, well, it made everything worse.
Absolutely. So what can be done about it?
Well, there's no easy fix. We need to strengthen the social safety net. We need to make housing more affordable, create more jobs, and we need to address the underlying issues of poverty and inequality.
It's a big challenge, but we can't ignore it.
We can't. Food is a basic human right. No one in this country should be going hungry. And on that note, that's our show for this week. We covered a lot of ground, from political upheavals and natural disasters to scientific breakthroughs and acts of human kindness. It's a reminder that the world is a complex and ever-changing place. But by staying informed, engaged, and compassionate, we can all contribute to a better future. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.